Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today on the website of Informal, the French auction portal, and we're going to have a look at another auction by Vichy Auctions based in France, one of the big kind of auction houses regarding musical instruments. If you watched the channel recently, you would have seen that there were two videos from Vichy. These were to do with plucked musical instruments and wind instruments and other things around that way. This is a different sale. This is books and musical instruments, but I think it's mainly just bowed strings and books. So it'll be quite interesting for those of you that are interested in bowed strings. Actually quite a lot of instruments. I think this is a lower tier auction, but it should still be pretty curious. 238 lots, it's a fair amount, so we can have a quick whiz through that. 24% is the buyer's premium, so whatever it goes for on the final hammer price, you need to add 24% to that. Just to reiterate, this is a French auction, so if you are outside of France and you want to bid, bear that in mind. Import, export fees, shipping, CITES, restrictions, all of that stuff. This auction is finishing on November the 14th. It's the 5th today, so you've got a good while left to go before the bidding closes. So I'll put a link in the description to the auction, and you can have a look at it at your own leisure. Just before we start, I'd just like to say, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing, like or commenting, because it does really help the channel quite a lot. So yeah, without further ado, I think we'll just kind of get onto it and see what we've got. So we've got a whole load of these kind of books about the Piedmontese makers, which is probably quite interesting. A couple of books here about the kind of lutheria in Emilia Romagna, which is kind of pretty curious, quite niche as well. Seems to be a lot of these same books, so that's pretty curious. Well, I guess probably a good opportunity to get one of the books quite cheap, I guess. But yeah, pretty bizarre. Anyway, and a few other different books as well going on there for whatever reason. Anyway, so we're into instruments now. We're just going to take an overview. German violin from the beginning of the 20th century. It's got an Amatis label, 361 the length of the back. That is your bog standard 19th century German trade violin with lots of antiquing, fake kind of neck graft there. This is a classic example there. Looks in actually not too bad a condition, so I think €400 starting price is probably fair. We've got some Mircore violins here on the budget kind of way. Let's have a look at one, because I do kind of ignore a lot of these ones. Oh wow, okay, this is kind of one of these kind of horrible instruments with this kind of back carving decoration, so not the nicest. Let's have a look at this. There's two violins here, saying a 3/4 violins here. Your pretty standard low level French stuff there. 3/4 JTL, which is probably actually a bit better than the other ones that we just looked at in terms of 3/4. Let's see what else we got here. Bertolini is kind of slightly higher level than the other stuff, French stuff, but still not particularly great. More kind of 20th century stuff, slightly different outline on this. It's kind of a bit more of a Guarneri-esque kind of outline to that one. Let's see what else we have here. Another Mircore violin with a slightly different outline here. Not too bad there, €200. 358 length of back, that's also fair. More 20th century Mircore stuff. They're saying this is an Eastern European violin, or actually Eastern country. Maybe they are talking about Asia as well, potentially. But I suspect they mean kind of Eastern Europe. All fairly standard stuff. 3/4 Mircore there, 20th century Mircore German violin. Let's have a look at this, just because these might be a little bit more interesting than the French stuff. Once again, doesn't look in too bad condition there. So with an Amati label, actually quite nice back there, so that's not too bad. Interesting what's going on here. Looks like some kind of trace of worm, I would think, looking at that, so that could be problematic, in a bit of a dangerous place there. So let's go on to the next page. You might hear some fireworks in the background because it's that night where everyone releases fireworks, so don't worry about that if you hear any of that. More kind of 20th century miracle stuff here. An industrial violin with a Dvorak label, so some kind of big manufacturing production. Yeah, you can see that. It's not particularly exciting. €30 to start. Violin by Labert Humbert, made in Miracle. That's your typical kind of French stuff there. 150, 361 length the back, obviously quite large as well. One of your JTLs here. 19th century violin re-varnished. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, it's been fiddled around with. Might have actually been fairly nice. Already one bid. Interesting. They've changed their auction portal a bit. Intershare seems a bit more friendly now. I think it was in need of an update. A few more JTLs, another Labert Humbert here. We're going to see much of the same, I think, in this auction. I don't think we're going to see much deviation. But anyway, let's have a look at this miracle violin from the beginning of the 20th century. Yeah, nothing too exciting there. Do have a look at the auction yourself. Like I said, the link is in the description. You'll be able to work it out for yourself what's interesting or not. Small size viola from the Val d'Arol workshop, made in Miracle around 1990. 355 length the back, €400 to start. 355 for a small size viola. Okay, that is pretty tiny, to be honest. Yeah, that's curious. Yeah, very small viola. Quite like the outline actually, and quite like the scroll, but very, very small there. That's quite odd. Just checking there's no, that's unfortunate that they don't have the side view, because it'd be interesting to see what the depth of the ribs are. If they're saying it's a small viola, that would have been interesting to see. More miracle stuff here. Right, a German 3/4 violin. Let's have a look at this one here. Once again, not super exciting. You see some of these violins with that kind of imprint at the back. More miracle stuff. Labert workshop there. More miracle, nothing too crazy. German violin, 19th century. This might be a little bit more interesting. 364 though. Wow, it's pretty long. Interesting kind of F-hole placement there. It's quite close together. Some interesting varnish going on there. €50 to start. You can't really argue with that much, really, can you? It's not too bad. Violin made in the JTL workshop here. 100 to start on that. 359 length of back. It's quite interesting purfling work there. I actually don't mind this so much. Obviously there's a fair bit of work to be done on it, but I quite like the aesthetics, the varnished F-hole placement. It's quite nice. It's quite quite symmetrical, so I quite like that. €100 starting. I think that's not too bad. Right, German violin, 20th century. Neck and fingerboard detached. I don't think this is anything nice at all. I think €50 is probably a bit high at a starting price on that one, to be quite honest. Got a half size miracle there, more half size 20th century miracle, half size Labert Humbert again. We're going to see much the same, I think. Let's have a look at this 19th century violin. Just looking for anything that might be slightly more interesting. Kind of curious things happening on the back there. €50, that's a real project for someone. 20th century miracle violin. It's got an Amatus label. Okay, interesting back there. Kind of curious. Might be something that's salvageable for someone. Unfortunately, it's missing one of the scroll eyes. But yeah, it's had a bit of a hard life, that one. More 20th century miracle there. More JTL stuff, 3/4. Industrial manufacturer. Half size stuff, 20th century. Let's see, is there anything else a bit more interesting? 3/4 Breton, German, 20th century. Let's have a look at this 19th century Mircore violin, the Guarnerius label. Again, needs quite a bit of work on that. More Mircore stuff. Let's have a look at this 20th century Mircore violin. Very, very standard stuff, 358. Mircore stuff, 3/4. Eastern Country violin. Okay, let's have a look at this Lebert Humbert. That's actually not too bad. Looks like something might be going on with the button there. 358. Says good condition. Just a bit worried about that kind of marking near the button there. But otherwise, not too bad. Fournier label. Let's have a look at this 20th century violin bearing a Mircore. Sorry, 20th century Mircore violin bearing a Klotz label. Okay, interesting. I actually quite like that. That's quite nice. You can see there's some fluting here in the F holes. Quite nice. Yeah, don't mind that. €200 to start. 358. It's not too long. Yeah, it's kind of, that's okay to me. I don't mind that. 3/4 here. 20th century stuff, more JTL. Let's have a look at this JTL one. Ooh. Okay, they've still got gut strings on that. It's quite interesting. Yeah, this would be quite a nice nice back if it wasn't for these marks. So this is these aren't cracks. These are, as far as I can kind of tell, I think this is spalting. So this is like a disease in the wood that's caused these marks. It's kind of like deterioration in the wood. Sometimes you do see this with violins like that, and they have these kind of equal tram lines, but this looks a little bit weird on this side. I think that's what it is, unless it's like a really weird kind of cracks that's been repaired, but I think that is some kind of small spalting, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe it could be a repaired crack, but they say good condition, so I'm going to assume that is just grain spalting. Okay, so let's go on to the next page, see if there's anything more interesting. Right, 18th century violin, very good, with a Matthias Thier label. Estimate €200. Various restorations. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, it's quite a nice back. Interesting. Here looks like you're gonna have to redo the neck graft if you get this. Quite interesting scroll there with a few kind of tool marks. Yeah, interesting kind of F holes. Look like they've been maybe modified a bit. But yeah, interesting violin, €200, more interesting than anything else we've seen so far. 20th century Mircore with a Didlot label. It's your standard stuff, isn't it? Even with the kind of blackened scroll chamfers there. Mircore violin, 20th century. 3/4 stuff here. German violin, 20th century. That looks like it's kind of, looks like the varnish has been modified a bit on that to me as well. Half size violin. Let's have a look at this one. This Strad label. Looks like a standard kind of French stuff. It's been messed around with as well. Different varnish at the scroll. Lots of breaks as well. Another JTL, 20th century German. Let's have a look at this Mircore violin. It's again fairly standard stuff there. 20th century German violin bearing a label for Johann Georg Lieb, broken heel. Fairly good condition. Once again, this is another one of these kind of standard, I'd say late 19th, early 20th century kind of violins. They look quite nice. I mean, it's an interesting slab cut piece of wood there. Obviously, like they say here, it's kind of has been broken and re-glued at the heel, not in the in the greatest manner, but yeah, it's just a trade violin. This one, it's not too bad actually. In a way, it's kind of interesting. €100. It's not a bad price, I don't think. 20th century violin here. 20th century German violin. Another 20th century German. Nothing too crazy. Let's have a look at this. 20th century Miracle violin with a Viome label. 356. Head replaced. Okay. Yeah, slightly odd. Looks like a big kind of open crack there, kind of right near or kind of on the bass bar. Let's see, what else do we have? 20th century violin, revarnished. More Miracle stuff here. 3/4 Miracle. Actually, let's have a quick look at this one while we're here. Once again, just standard stuff. Looking for something a bit more interesting. 19th century German. Once again, it's all fairly standard. Medifino, JTL there, Lebert. This is all standard stuff. More JTL. A 7/8 Miracle. Let's have a look at this one. See what's going on here. Once again, pretty standard. 20th century Miracle or Miracle stuff. Miracle JTL. More 3/4. Nothing too crazy. Much of the same. Miracle late 19th century. Let's have a look at this one. The JTL one there. It's got that really dark red varnish you get some of these French violins. Lebrun label. I mean, that might be popular for some. It's like a little bit strange things going on with the grain on the top there, but it's kind of interesting looking. Yeah, that might be popular with some people. More Miracle stuff here. 19th century Miracle violin. Different restorations and breaks on the table. 358. This one looks like it has that kind of, would have said like Marquis de l'Air or whatever on the back. It looks like that kind of violin, but it's been messed around with quite a lot. Right, violin by Didier Nicolas Ain. Well, sorry, just Didier Nicolas. Miracle around 1800. It's a shame about the condition, but that would have been quite a nice violin. €100 to start. That's fine, you can't argue with that. 20th century Miracle violin. Nothing too good about that. 3/4 Miracle as well. More JTL 3/4 Miracles. Half size. 20th century 3/4. Let's go on to the next page. Let's hope we can see something else. More JTL stuff here. Half size. More 20th century Miracle. Okay, right. Violin by Dominic Salazar. Made in Miracle around 1820, 1830. 363. So it's pretty long. But this is probably one of the nicer violins actually in this auction. It's got potential. €200. It's not too bad. It is unfortunately very long, so that is one of the problems. Half size Miracle there. 3/4 JTL. 3/4 violin. More standard stuff here. That's had an unfortunate event. Another JTL. Let's have a look. Some of these JTLs can be nicer than others. That one is pretty standard, not very nice scroll. Right, a 3/4 French violin from the 18th century. Violin recut, head replaced. Okay, 342. Interesting. Yeah, this might be a curious project for someone. €100. It's had a lot of problems there. That's interesting. 20th century German violin, €80. That's had some bizarre varnish things going on there. Another one with a fake kind of net graft line there. Okay, 3/4 German violin, 20th century. Actually looks like it might be okay. I don't think that's too bad for €20. but some cracks going on here. I'm sure there's many other issues as well. More 20th century. Oh, here's a Marquis de Lair kind of one here. It's a signature at the top. I think the other one was fairly similar to that. Pretty standard trade stuff. 20th century miracle, 3/4 miracle, German violin, early 20th century. Yeah, that's a standard stuff. That's actually quite a nasty looking one, not particularly good. 19th century miracle violin, 360mm in length. That's actually quite nice. Interesting kind of grain pattern there, so that's not too bad as it goes. Quite a nice scroll actually, nice colour. That's got potential. 20th century miracle, another 20th century miracle violin with a Steiner label. That's also not too bad, €80. Bottom seal detached, okay. 3/4 miracle, 3/4 miracle. Okay, this is interesting. 19th century miracle violin with a Violin label. Okay, 360. Yeah. Or Violin mark even. That's kind of an interesting looking one. Kind of unusual to see such dark varnish on a French violin. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's a curious looking one. I quite like that actually as well. €100 starting price. Is pretty big though, so it's interesting to see. Or 20th century miracle, 20th century German. Let's have a look at this one. 20th century Eastern countries. It's pretty standard as it goes. 3/4 miracle, 20th century German with a Gaspar de Salo label. Once again, it's your standard 19th century stuff. Here, just with slightly curious F-holes, and it's a shame you can't see the front of these because they actually have quite curious scrolls with like a simple turn, and you get a lot of them like this. And once again, I think it's got this one might actually have a real net graft. It's hard to see. It looks like the grain line kind of follows. Actually, it's just been modified a bit, so it probably doesn't have a graft, but they're kind of interesting looking. 20th century violin with a Bergonzi label. It's been heavily messed around with that one. Violin from the German school, fairly good condition, 365. That is pretty long. Another kind of horrible 19th century kind of violin. Late 19th century violin, non-original piece on the table at the F levels. Yep, you can see that. Look at that. They've kind of, something's happened to those F holes and they've been modified, so that is unfortunate. Not particularly nice. €200 seems optimistic. 20th century German violin. This looks like your standard stuff. Yeah, it's not particularly great. Workshop made Lebert violin there. It's standard stuff. 20th century miracle with a Joseph Rocker label. €30 on that. It's quite nice back on that actually. Some restorations, 361. I don't mind that. That's kind of okay. 183. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of an odd kind of varnish on that, but you can see the layers of the kind of the base, the kind of ground, and then a couple of different colours. I think it's kind of curious. It's got a few cracks and things, but I think that back is fairly nice, so I think. 20th century German violin there. 3/4, more 3/4 stuff. Nothing too crazy. 20th century miracle. So another one of these kind of miracle violins with a, so this is the really dark red varnish that's kind of, yeah, really starting to degrade a bit there. Let's see, more miracle stuff. More 20th century German. Let's have a look at this miracle violin from JTL, slightly later on. Fairly good condition. Yeah, 362. It's quite long, but it's got quite a nice kind of back with a bit of bird's eye in it, so it's actually not too bad as it goes. €200. Looks like it's Not in too bad condition, a few bits of damage here, but that could probably be sorted out fairly easily. So now moving on to the final page. Let's see if there's anything exciting here. 20th century miracle violin, 3/4, 20th century, blah blah blah. I mean, if you want to get a cheap French violin, this is definitely the place to go. 20th century, JTL, 20th century stuff, nothing too exciting here. 20th century, the miracle violin here. Let's have a look at this lot of 2 violins. 20th century miracle violin and a 3/4. Let's see what we've got here. All very standard looking, to be honest. Another lot of 2 violins. Yeah, nothing too exciting either. 20th century violin, probably from the eastern countries. Okay. Ooh. We've highlighted everything there. 1/8 miracle, 20th century companion label. This is the low end French, but I guess probably don't see that many 1/8 violins that aren't kind of modern Chinese these days. 20th century miracle violin. Let's have a look at that. Nothing too crazy there. 20th century violin, German Beringen Basta label. It's kind of another one of these kind of trade violins, but a bit of a fancier model. German violin there, Mark Kirkin, around 1900. Three-quarter miracle, German violin, 20th century. Late 19th century JTL violin. Let's have a look at that. It's not too bad as things go, but 364 is massive size. German violin, late 19th century, partly unvarnished, some restorations, 362. Curious kind of outline, but nothing too great. Miracle violin from the beginning of the 20th century. Lots of fireworks going on at the moment. See 20th century miracle violin, more miracle stuff. This looks kind of interesting. Miracle violin, 20th century JTL workshop, partly varnished on the table, 360. I think that might be an okay project for someone. €100, it's not too bad. Breton model, more miracle stuff. Let's have a look at this one. Miracle violin, beginning of the 20th century. Nasty kind of break there at the button, otherwise it would have been kind of okay. 20th century miracle violin, more miracle violins here. Another miracle stuff, German violin, 20th century. Let's have a quick look at that, but I don't think it's too interesting. No, that's in a bit of a horrid state. €30, that sounds fair. A lot of 2 violins, miracle, 20th century half size. Another half size. Actually, kind of not too bad, to be honest. Definitely a project for someone. A lot of 2 violins, 20th century miracle, 3/4. Pretty horrible, that is. €30. I wouldn't even bother, to be honest, even for that. Miracle 3/4 violin there, €80. 20th century. Yeah, that one actually could be a fairly decent 3/4. More 3/4 violins here. I think we've looked at enough of those. More 3/4. 20th century miracle violin there, €400. Wow, that's a hefty price tag. The Strad label looks like it's in fairly good condition. Okay. 20th century miracle violin. Yeah, nothing particularly nice there. Another 20th century miracle violin with a Guadagnini label, €300. And the last one, 2 3/4 violins. Okay. Well, there you have it. That is the books and bowed stringed instruments auction from Vichy, which is happening on the 14th of November. Not going to lie, not a particularly nice auction with anything particularly interesting, unless you are a luthier and you want to get a cheap French project, or you just love French violins and you want to be able to do something up on the cheap. If that is your plan, then this is the auction for you. However, if you are interested in things that are actually interesting or not projects that are gonna be good for luthiers, then I don't think it's probably the auction for you. But anyway, have a look at it yourself, link in the description as always. Thanks a lot for watching, really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao, bye.